Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here today with a bit of an update on 3 plants that I have shown in previous videos, but it has been a while since I have shown them on camera, so I thought it is a good time to give you a quick update on them. And I would start right away here with this cascading Ficus Benjamina. It is 2 plants in here actually. The top here, unfortunately, there was a branch that died back, so I thought I still want this tree to also develop some sort of canopy up here, even though it is cascading. So what I'm actually doing is a little fusion project here also as well right now. So you can see the wire that is attached to the 2 different trunks here. The one here coming a little bit in the back, so it is actually hidden also a bit in the back here. And then forming all this canopy up here. It is the same Ficus Benjamina variety. So of course the foliage looks basically the same. And sooner or later we will then decide what we have to prune back here. Right now I just let it grow wild and free here on top, because of course we want this trunk here to thicken to then merge into the other trunk when it has no longer any other way to go. And that is one of the goals here. And the big thing that I did the last time was repot it into this little bonsai pot. As you can see right now for the video, I have it simply here on a little pot. Normally this is standing, where this is just simply basically draping off of a shelf, so it has the space to grow further downwards, which it is doing quite nicely. And I have had this growing now freely for a couple of months actually, because right now I'm just focusing on it developing a little bit more foliage. You can see it is developing nice branching also here. And sooner or later we'll go in, wire this out a little bit, maybe remove one or the other branch. But for now I'm just letting this really enjoy its growth season still. As I said, both of them growing a little bit thicker. Here in the back you can definitely see then also the 2 branches a little bit better, how they are going together in this tree. Of course the growth is a little less than it used to be before. Of course when we repot in a small pot like this, growth always somewhat stops or slows down. In this case it hasn't fully stopped, it has slowed down because there was not that much root mass to begin with, so it fit quite easily in here into this pot. So I still think it has room to grow in here, but I do see that the growth has slowed down a little bit. I make sure of course also fertilize it in here. It is in fully inorganic soil, so you need to fertilize anyway a little bit more. And as it is in such a small confined space, you have to even have a closer look at fertilizing. Because with this size of a pot and I use liquid fertilizer, it simply washes out after 2 or 3 waterings. So you definitely have to keep a look at that, also how the tree is doing. You can see there's, for example, one leaf here that shows a little bit sign of nutrient deficiency. So again, that is something when I spot a leaf like this, I make sure that when was the last time I fertilized, has it maybe been too long, and then go in again and fertilize. And since then also of course there is still growth happening, so it has not fully stopped, but yeah, somewhat stunted I would say. But the main plans for this in the future is to, of course, focus on the one hand on the cascading part of the tree, so everything down here, which really starts to grow nicely, and now it really has reached a point where it is lower than the actual pot, which of course is what we want to achieve anyway. And we can start to form then little pads here. We might even get rid of this one up here to make the difference a little bit more pronounced still, but that is something we look at when we really work in detail on it. And as I said, also then pruning back up here a little bit. Maybe we only keep the one growing here in the back, get rid of this one, or we just create one quite dense pad up here with whatever foliage we have at hand. But this is something probably by the end of growth season where I want to prune back and wire it then a little bit so it can set in also over winter. But for now, let's just let this grow freely and see where we end up with, or what we end up with then by the end of growth season, and how we can best then continue working on that. So another tree I want to give a little bit of an update about is this Ficus ginseng. It's one of many in my collection, also often known as Ficus Microcarpa. The one big thing I have done with this tree the last time I've showed it is taken out one of the main 2 trunks that have formed here. It is grafted on, so I took out one of those grafts. You can see still here the slight scarring from when this tree was grafted, when it was grown commercially. And the other one, as it was quite unsightly and the graft was very pronounced on this one, I decided to, in a more drastic step, take it out completely, go for a more triangular shape here at the bottom of the trunk, also then tapering out, of course, quite severely to the top, and then have only foliage here on the top of the tree. And looking back, I would definitely say it was the right decision. I'm quite happy with how this tree is coming along. A lot of new growth happening now in growth season. Right here, this side is facing away from the window. I need to rotate it then later on because most of the foliage you can see right now from here. But yeah, the foliage is coming in quite nicely, quite healthily again. Also, of course, fertilizing now here in growth season, definitely a topic where I need to make sure I fertilize it well enough. But the new growth comes in healthily, so should be all set up and doing nicely at the moment. It has been thinning out a little bit over winter, I must say, simply something that often happens with my Ficus ginseng. They sometimes tend to go through phases where they do lose a couple of leaves, but it's nothing really concerning ever because they bounce back quite nicely and often even grow new leaves while they lose the old ones. So I think it's for them just sometimes a pattern of growing, at least the ones I have in my collection. And right now it hasn't had any trouble with that. You can even see here a branch that might have lost all its leaves. You can see green tips in here right now, so also this is coming back. Some older branches like down here, maybe they will die back, but that is then something by the next pruning session. I will go in, take out anything that seems to have died back, just cleaning up the tree a little bit. And what is the plan for this tree? It is at the moment also, I would say, of course, still focusing a little bit on the recovery. There was a severe cut that has been made here. It is callousing over quite nicely, so this is healing definitely the way it was intended. But for now, I don't work too much on this tree. I mean, if I see anything that is going on with this tree that I have to deal with, of course I deal with it, but otherwise I quite simply leave this alone a little bit, let it grow now, especially in growth season, hoping that it will continue to grow nicely and healthily also. And then I would go into wiring out some of these parts a little bit more in the future, because of course we are left with this one branch or this one trunk line up here with then the branches coming off of it. So we need to make the most out of these branches to really create a nice looking apex, and that's definitely something that's still very much in the making. We can definitely spread this out the next time we work on this. Probably also end of growth season normally is for me a good point always to really look at this more structural things where I want to set it up for the future. There's no branch in here that seems to be too thick already to wire, so it's also not that I will lose the ability over growth season if this continues to grow. So definitely time to leave this until the end of growth season and then really work on the shape of the tree and the shape of these branches up here. And by then also this will continue to callus over, and then we can definitely also decide what we really want as the front of the tree or the back of the tree. I do think just the way I potted this up, this is the more logical front, because the entire trunk line here, it leans a bit forward, so it's more inviting than the other side. So that is probably the one I would go with. And I do like the trunk line here also quite a lot. But as I said, maybe we would need to wire out something like this then here, for example, a little bit to show more of the trunk line still. But as I said, in the end of growth season, probably we'll do a little video about wiring this little guy out a little bit more. And this brings me already to the next tree, namely also a Ficus ginseng. However, this is not a crafted one. This is one where the original foliage of the root base is actually then forming the apex and all the foliage up here. And one thing that happened to this tree is I already decided which branches I want to really work with in the future. I removed everything else, and then this tree very harshly reacted to that, lost basically all of its leaves, and then started to shoot out so much new growth all around here, as you can see. So this is so full right now. What has been left was, for example, this branch up here that was one of the original branches I intended to keep on, but this doesn't really make any sense any longer. So the thing that I'm actually going to do here is take this out with as well some of the old branching down here. So this is the only thing I'm actually going to work on to just shorten this a little bit. But again, I don't want to go in now again too early. And I think that was the problem with deciding which branches I want to keep and which branches we're going to take out. And then it goes through the same thing again. So again, here right now, the plan is let this grow as crazy as it wants to grow and then really decide which branches. I just have to really find the sweet spot. I don't want to wait too long, because if all of these branches, and they unfortunately always come out with multiple branches forming around one growth point, if all of them get woody, it leaves a very unsightly little stub here over the time, and that is something we won't be able to correct and really afterwards when we only decide on one or two of those branches. So I have to simply find that sweet spot where I can already picture which branches do make sense and they start to become woody, but it's still early enough to take out the other ones. But you can see some growth is coming from down here right now. So really the lowest possible point where the actual root mass, which is in the Ficus ginseng always this one, it is exposed root actually. And up here is the actual trunk where a lot of these branches are forming now. So a lot of choices to pick from in the future. And it's going to be a difficult choice, that much is clear. I don't want to wait too long because you have a lot of competing branches in here, but right now I can see all of this is just green, not really thick anyhow, except for the ones I have kept on before. And maybe we go back to these branches, maybe they still are the ones that make the most sense. For example, here that is the only really woody branch, and that is one of the branches we kept on before that are shortened right now, also one of the two branches. And it's still throwing out a lot of new growth up here. So maybe this will be one of the ones we're gonna keep. In general, I just like the look of this tree. Of course, the idea is to have it leaning against this rock, which is glued into this pot. So it didn't come in this pot, of course. I repotted it. I had this pot where I had another tree inside. But this Ficus ginseng just fit perfectly. It had quite an unsightly stub here on this side, which is now hidden, nicely leaning against this rock. And it gives a nice looking illusion simply. I think this is just a compilation or constellation together that works quite well. And now if you picture in hopefully 2-3 years with a nice apex more up here, not really down where the tree is, or the rock is still at the height of the tree, roughly, then it would definitely make more sense in here. But for that, we need 2 or 3 nice thick branches developing up here that we can then work with. Of course, always shortening it back. When we don't have the grafted variety on these ficus, what happens often is that these leaves become bigger and bigger because it is simply a variety of ficus that has bigger leaves, also thicker roots, and that's why they use it for the root base. However, the leaves sometimes can become a little bit too thick if we don't prune it back, if we don't maybe even defoliate or partially defoliate at one point. But that is all still in the future of this tree. That is not something we need to worry about right now. What we need to worry about right now is which of this growth will fit best for the overall design in the future. And for that, it still needs to grow anyway. But I thought I'd give you an update on this tree. I haven't shown it in so long. Last time I showed it was quite bare looking back then because there was not a lot of foliage on it. So I just wanted to show you how nicely it has rebounced and that, yeah, sooner or later we can work on this tree again. So right now, basically, a lot of those trees I have right now that I haven't shown in a while, they are simply at a stage where I'm waiting for them to grow. Of course, you always need to have some patience when it comes to bonsai projects, but I thought I'd give you a little update on these trees. If you have any questions about any of these trees or any ideas or in which direction you would take them, feel free to leave those in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like. If you enjoy my channel, feel free to subscribe to it, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care.